we just talked about multi-container projects and doing Docker Compose and Kubernetes, doing some really cool stuff like that, like coordinating containers together. And we're going to go into one more section. We're going to leave that entire ecosystem behind. And we're going to talk about something called OCI containers. And OCI stands for Open Container Initiative. So these are going to be like non-Docker containers. So we're going to do containers, but without Docker. Because I want to kind of prove the point to you that like Linux containers are not just Docker. Docker is not just Linux containers. And so we're going to get into this OCI stuff. So we're going to talk about two different technologies that are paired together. One's called Buildah and one's called Podman. So let's go ahead and jump into Buildah. So first of all, these tools only work in Linux. So we're going to be using actually a Docker container that contains Buildah to make all this work, which I know is containers within containers, but that's just kind of how that all works. So if you're working with Windows and WSL, everything should just work seamlessly. You shouldn't have to use necessarily the container or anything like that. If you're on Mac OS, you're going to have to jump into the Buildah container with me. So that's, I left a link there if you want to go check it out. That's just on Docker Hub. So the Buildah container, which is Buildah/Buildah, has both Buildah and Podman in it, so you don't need both. You don't need two different containers. So a lot of the gravity around containers and the container world is centered around Docker, right? Like that's kind of that was the first to market. That was, kind of, yeah, it's kind of the center of gravity there. And in an effort to not necessarily be locked into one vendor, because we don't want to be, we don't want just like one cloud provider or one operating system or just iPhone or just Mac. It's a good idea to have like a competitive marketplace of ideas. And so that's when the Open Container Initiative kind of came to fruition. So it is a project underneath the Linux Foundation, so there's a lot of support behind it. And it's a good thing to keep in mind that Docker is a part of OCI. So this is not Docker versus OCI, right? They're both competing or together and helping each other. It's a very collaborative environment. So it's great. And the other thing is that you can build containers with Docker and execute them with Podman and Buildah, and vice versa. You can build them with Buildah and Podman, and you can execute them with Docker. So these tools interrelate, and they're compatible with each other in that particular way. So it encourages a healthy diversity of players in the market. Everybody wins here. So Buildah and Podman are not the only project. I'll talk about a couple more at the end. These are just the two that have the most steam, that are kind of rolling forward, that I wanted to get in front of you. And so it's kind of strange that we're taking Docker and we're splitting it into two different products here, right? Buildah and Podman. But in reality, Docker is actually split the same way. You just don't actually really realize it. So Docker, there's actually Docker, which is the client, which does the building and things like that. And then there's a different thing running in the background called Dockerd, which stands for Docker daemon, which is actually what's executing the code for you, or executing the containers for you. And so when you say like Docker run something, it sends that to the Docker daemon in the background, and it's running that stuff for you via the Docker daemon. So even though you didn't know that that was there, that's actually what's happening. And that's kind of how this is split with Buildah and Podman. Buildah is going to build the containers for you, and then Podman is going to be the one that's actually executing it for you. The advantage of Podman versus over Dockerd is it's actually not running as a daemon in the background. It's actually just executes it and then kind of gets out of the way. So let's get started with Buildah. So the funny thing about how Buildah was named, it's named how you would say builder with a Boston accent. Because apparently one of the core maintainers of this project was from Boston, and he would always call it Buildah, which I'm not doing a very good impression of it because I'm not from Boston, but I thought that was very funny. So you can follow the instructions to download and execute and all that kind of stuff here if you want to. I'm just going to use it directly in the container. Feel free to do the same with me. If you are going to install it, which I did do within my WSL computer here, you will very likely need to put here at this registries.conf, you will probably need to put this, which I pasted in there. Again, I'm going to be using the container, so I'm not going to do anything like that, but you might need this. And you're also going to have to make sure you have this thing called run C, which is another project, again, from this Open Container Initiative project. And runc is just a, hey, take this container and do something with it, right? Like execute it in some fashion. That's what runc is. Runc underpins Buildah and Podman. All right, so let's go ahead and run Buildah, or the container. So I'm going to run this in my environment, and this will run the Buildah container, and it will mount in your current directory wherever you are. So I'm going to come over here to this. Let's do the more complicated cd, oops, / more complicated node app. Is this one that we did with? Yeah, this is great. Perfect. So we'll do this one. So I'm going to run that Docker command right there. Again, I would, if you're going to do this via Docker, do it this way. If you're not going to do it via Docker, you don't need to run this. So this is going to mount in this directory at right there, source. Okay, so now I'm inside of a container, which is going to be running, let's check, I don't even know, etc issue. And I'm pretty sure that this is Red Hat. So let's go with that. I think this is Red Hat Linux. Okay, and so now I have access to Buildah. Version. There you go. Cool. It's a tool written in Go, in case you were curious.